So, hi everybody. I'm going to be talking about the work that we did in developing the Chicago Parent Program and some of the lessons I learned that might be useful to you who are thinking about doing behavioral interventions. So I do have a disclosure to make first. I am the developer of the Chicago Parent Program, and although I don't receive any income from it, we do generate revenue from sales of the program that we then use for development of the program. And so I do have a financial conflict of interest to disclose. So in the beginning, when we first started developing or thinking about this program, I became very aware of the fact that there were a lot of evidence-based parenting programs out there, but they had almost entirely been developed and tested on white middle-class families, and that's still pretty true. They may have been since tried to adapt for other populations, but the original, the ones that have really the strongest evidence, who've been around the longest, this is really one of the weaknesses that we identified. But all parents want their kids to do well. All parents love their children and want them to be successful. But how parents get there, or the path that they negotiate to get there, is so linked to their own childhoods, their values, their cultures, the child rearing context that they have before them, and their access to resources. So when we developed the program, we decided we had NIH funding. We started doing it in collaboration with a parent advisory board that I pulled together. And these are parents who were then, I was in Chicago, who were from the Chicago communities, African American and Latinx. And I worked with them for about 8 months on, if they were to come to a parenting program, what would make them want to come? What would make them never want to come back? What were the challenges that they had? What were some of the, and I really talked about all kinds of these evidence-based strategies that are taught in most programs and how they thought about them, how they felt about them. And they really worked with me, I worked with them, to design a program that really addressed the needs of families raising children in under-resourced communities, and especially families of color. So, the Chicago Parent Program is a 12-session group-based parenting skills program. The primary goals are to strengthen parenting skills and confidence and parent-child relationships, and to reduce behavior problems in young children. We really focused on children roughly 2 to 6 years old because so many of the early challenges that parents face and some of the bad habits they develop with their children that become, pretty entrenched over time, really start during this period. It's really where children, learn to become more defiant, and parents may or may not respond to that defiance in ways that really are helpful. And we're going to talk about that. Oh, and the other thing I meant is it has been over the years tested in a number of randomized clinical trials. I have in the small print here a number of our papers, which I'm happy to share with anybody who'd like them. So there's some important features I want to talk about this program that make it different or important. So I think one is that it's guided by actually 2 theories. One is called the coercive family process model, which is part of social learning theory, and the other one's attachment theory. Now, coercive family process model essentially says that parents and children inadvertently reinforce all the wrong behaviors in one another. And it sounds like, why would we do that? But it's really common. So any of you who have children or who've been children or watched other people with their children, one of the things that parents tend to do is when their children are playing nicely with their siblings, when they've done what we've asked them to do, when they're getting along with others, sharing their toys, we tend as parents say very little about it. But the minute they start fighting with their siblings, they don't do what we ask, we say an enormous amount. And what happens is that attention tends to feed the noncompliance, tends to feed the aversive behavior. And what ends up happening over time is there's this escalation, so that maybe the first time you scream at your child, they stop and surprise and they stop what they're doing, but then they get used to it, and then you have the parent starts upping the ante on it, and now it's threatening, and so there's this escalation. And what coercive family process, this is the model, what you really want to do is change that cycle. And what you want parents to do is spend a lot more time giving their attention to the things that they like and a lot less attention to the things that they want to see stopped. Sounds easy, it's really not. The other is attachment theory, and essentially attachment theory is the importance for children of growing up in the context of nurturing, responsive, and consistent relationships with adults. So a lot of what we also try to do is help parents understand the importance of what they're trying to do from the standpoint of their relationship with their child. We use video vignettes and group discussion, and I'm actually going to give some examples of how we do that in a minute. And as I said before, they're 2-hour group sessions, and they're led by 2 trained group leaders. And one thing that's important about our program is you only need to have get a high school diploma. You don't have to have a college degree or graduate degree to be a group leader. And it's a 2-day training to learn how to use the program. This is briefly the overview of the program. Unit 1, which is 4 weeks, 4 sessions, is really focused on that, what I was talking about before, that strategic use of your attention to get the behavior you want to see more often on your kids. So a lot of what we try to do in these early sessions is help parents sort of figure out what is it you value as a parent? What's your goal as a parent? What is it you really want to see that you want to reinforce? What's really important to you? And then the second unit, which is called Using Your Authority Wisely, is now helping parents get clear about what's the behavior you don't want to see. And even like when I use an ignore and distract, what are the behaviors you don't like but are ignorable, and what's not ignorable? And all parents will differ on all of these. But just the act of having parents get clear about what they want, what their goals are, and then strategically using these techniques to get their goals. So all the parents set their own goals. We don't set the goals for parents, they do. We just help them to figure out some different ways of getting there than they might not have known before. The third unit, which is 2 sessions, which is on stress management, and it's reducing your stress and problem-solving skills. And then unit 4, there is no new content. It's really like putting it all together. So like in the 11th session, parents might write down a problem they're still having, after all these weeks with their kids, put it into a hat and you pass it around, and somebody else might pick up the problem and say what they've learned that they might suggest using for it. So a lot of the program, the reason you do it in groups is because the connections that parents make with one another, the support they give one another, the sense of normalcy that happens, the normalization of the problems, all of that, the group process is a really important therapeutic benefit for the program. So there's like a million programs out there. What makes this one different? Well, the first is that we have about 160 vignettes that are used. They're not models of perfect behavior, because frankly, there's no such thing as a perfect parent, but it is the vignettes are really to trigger discussion and problem solving, because it's so much easier to critique somebody else than yourself. And again, you'll see that in a minute. The majority of our videos are families of color. Based on what the advisory board said, they really wanted to see parents managing misbehavior in public, or in, getting home after work, and you've got to get dinner ready, and there's homework and getting kids to bed, and the chaos of getting kids out in the morning. And so really what we did is we auditioned families from Chicago who just let us shadow them with a camera for a half a day. And that's the stuff that we captured, is all of that normal, challenging, semi-chaotic stuff that happens, and what parents normally do, sometimes well and sometimes not so well. But everything, all of the strategies are really framed to enhance the relevance. And that's a lot of what the advisory board did to help us. So here's an example. We had a really good conversation about spanking. And the parent said to us that, that they were spanked as kids and they were fine, and their mothers were spanked and they're fine. And they frankly probably wouldn't want to go to a program or not continue going to a program that advocated no spanking. And they were pretty clear about this. And interestingly, 99% of parenting programs, say no spanking. And we didn't want to advocate for spanking. So I said, all right, how many of you in here were spanked as children? And they all raised their hand. And I said, how many of you here were spanked as children and still felt loved? And half the hands went down, half stayed up. And I said, those of you with your hands still up, how did you know you were still loved? And essentially, they came up with these 8 keys to effective discipline, which they said, you know, I knew when I did that behavior that I was going to get spanked. You know, she, you know, there was no rage, there was no humiliation going on. You know, somebody said, she goes, she told me she loved me as she was whooping me. You know, there was, so out of that conversation we have is what we teach in the program, which is the 8 keys to effective discipline. So when parents talk about whatever, you know, is it okay to spank? Is it okay to do this? We don't, as group leaders, say, that's okay or that's not okay. It's like we go to the 8 keys. How does that fit with the 8 keys? And Frank, I think this has been one of the most popular aspects of the program. It's very non-judgmental and it's something all parents can buy into. And frankly, parents are right. You can yell at your child in a damaging way and never lay a hand on them. So a lot of this focus on spanking, I get it, but we're also ignoring a lot of the verbal abuse that goes on in families that can actually be very, very harmful. So now I'm going to show a couple of video vignettes as examples. So this is one, and I hope it plays well, and you can see it. So this is in the second session. We talk about the importance of routines and traditions. And in the context of that session, we talk about the importance of reading to your child as a routine. And I think parents have all heard this, but a lot of parents who've never been read to don't really know how to read to the child in a way that is child-centered, which was the first session, which is talking about child-centered time. So with that in mind, we show this video.
Kevin, you can read too. Who's that?
Bella.
Tripped and fell.
Chickies. Tripped and fell. She cried.
I lost my
Glasses.
Bella.
Right here.
Yeah, she lost them. Ooh, what's that? Is that a ghost?
No. Cat.
Oh, it's the cat. Scooby-Doo looked under the
Bed.
ranks. He yelled, Scooby-Doo found a
Spiders.
under the bed. Are you scared of spiders?
No.
No. Yeah, right. That's how you see it. Yeah, you see a spider, you go, dang, mommy, spider in the house. But he did not find Velma's.
Glasses.
Oh, look at the spread there. Good food, isn't it? Kevin, what do you like on that table?
Sandwich.
You like a sandwich?
I like all of them.
You like all of them? Yeah, you probably do.
So we show that video in the group, and the questions, so the group leader has a manual, it's very manualized, and asks certain questions like, what did you see happen here? How did you know that this is a routine? How did the parent keep the children engaged? Is this a routine the children are going to want to do again? What are the children learning? How are the children feeling? And so it's really, as I said, these are really triggers sort of pull out in from for parent to focus parents' attentions on certain aspects of why this strategy really is effective for building relationships as well as learning and routines. Here's another one. This one is one of my favorites. This is in the 5th session. We talk about setting, when you set a limit, you got to follow through on it. And here's an example.
John says you gotta leave your toys. You can take your books, but you leave your toys, okay? You can take it in the car then, okay?
Okay, so what did she just learn? So this is a great video. It's like 10 seconds long, and parents immediately can connect with it because every parent has been trying to get out the door, and you'll promise them anything. Well, the keys to the car, just let's get out the door. But now you've set up a real power struggle at the threshold of the daycare center where you have to take the toys away from the child at the daycare center, and that's not good either. And so it really leads to this really good conversation about how hard it is to follow through on limits. But she's 2 years old. What is she? 2 or 3 years old. She's already learned. If I whine and I cry, then I get what I want. And it's so much easier to see that when you see it in a video like that. It's been a really good conversation. We have great conversations about this one. And let's see, one more I'll show. So this is I think I mentioned in the program, the first principle of the program is if you, again, go back to the coercive process model. If you want to see a behavior again, give it your attention. If you don't want to see a behavior again, don't give it your attention or give it a lot less attention. And so here I think this is in the 7th session on ignore. Parents said that they really struggle with ignoring misbehavior, but especially in public. They don't think it, they think you can't do it in public. So this is a family that's been in a laundromat for about 3 hours, and this little boy is really angry that he wasn't allowed to have candy. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, and so we show this vignette, and again, there's discussion questions about, well, how did she ignore, and just pointing out that, and again, we want parents to identify this. How did she make sure he was safe? How did she ignore? Did the ignoring work? What made it work? Those kinds of questions, and then parents talk about, I couldn't do that in a laundromat, and in public, and another parent might say, no, you just tell everybody, like, you got this. And they help each other trying to figure out how to translate this strategy into something that will work for them. Okay, I think that's all the videos I have. All right, so I'm going to talk briefly about, I was given my assignment to talk about my top 3 lessons that I've learned in doing this work. So the first big lesson I learned is that scalable interventions have to be guided by a good theory. And I talked about some of the theory that we use, but the reason it's so important is not just an academic issue, but it gives, not only does it give coherence to an intervention, they have to be coherent, but the first thing that agencies are going to want to do is adapt it. And so a good theory tells you what are the essential features of this intervention that have to be preserved and which can be flexed to fit within the needs of the organization. And that's really important if you're going to intervention that you want to work in under-resourced communities and in agencies, they're all going to be different. And so, there's a agency that works with homeless families in Detroit that's using the program, and then there's public schools in Baltimore City, they're using it. They're different organizations, they have different cultures and needs, but except they really do want to help their families, and so you really want to help them think about what can be flexed to meet their needs and why. The second lesson I've learned is that scalable behavioral interventions have to be guided by strong training and quality monitoring system. Behavioral interventions are really, really hard to replicate well in under-resourced settings. It's not like, you've packaged a device or a drug that should work regardless of where they're being implemented. Behavioral interventions are really so linked to who it is that's delivering the intervention. And even though they look like they're pretty low risk, they actually can do some serious harm. They really can. And so you really have to make sure that your training is good, strong, and that in our case, we realized that the secret sauce is the group leaders. And so, and I have to tell you, after doing this for many years, I can't tell you what the secret ingredient is that makes a good group leader aside from the training, but I can tell you it's not having a graduate degree, because we've had people implementing these programs with PhDs who stink, and we've got people who are paraprofessionals who work in the community who are just fabulous because they know their audience, they know what they're doing, but there's aspects that have nothing to do with education that make you really good at these interventions. And when we meet, we can talk more about what that is. But if you're doing a behavioral intervention, it's really something you've got to think about. And then how do you monitor quality as it's being replicated in these other settings? And my third lesson is that the skills you have to learn for scaling an evidence-based program are very different from the skills that you learn to do good randomized trials. And I have had to acquire business expertise to some extent, but it's made me uncomfortable, to be honest. Am I a scientist or am I a salesperson? And I have to be very, very careful about thinking about the implications of my conflict of interest. But then thinking, you know, you don't, if you go through all the work of creating these programs, you absolutely want it to be used. You want it to function well outside of the, you know, the fragile conditions of a randomized clinical trial. So you have to sort of think about, well, who is my audience? Who are my customers? I mean, when I started out, it really was to help children. And then I realized in order to help children or prevent mental health problems in young children, I had to be an advocate for the families and for parents. But then I realized that it was communities and agencies that were purchasing the program were going to be wanting to implement the program. So what was it going to make them want to use this program? And then the issue of payment of, you know, in our country, we are not very good about paying for prevention. We have to wait until children have a psychiatric diagnosis and then Medicaid will pay for it. But right now, the way the policies are set up, it is not easy for agencies to get reimbursed for implementing high quality programming. And I think so to some extent, the other one of my customers, my audience is going to have to be policymakers. And so thinking about how to talk to them as well. And I think that's it. And I really do look forward to having a conversation with everybody soon. Bye.